Receive a presentation now from the petitioners. If you would like to come forward and pull up additional chairs to the table as necessary. And Ms. McCollum will help with that. Welcome, and if you want to just go down the line and introduce yourselves to the committee. Yeah.
Oh,
My name is Ramesh Razan. I'm the lead petitioner on this article.
I'm Raul Razan.
I'm Anirudh Iyer.
I'm Anish Wardi.
And I'm Saddam Dosi, and we're all juniors at Shrewsbury High School.
Excellent, thank you.
So first of all, thanks for giving us the opportunity to present. I come to Shrewsbury 10 years ago, and I think earlier presentation took me down the memory lane because my daughter was in the 2015 10 Scholars. And I think it's not about the cost. It is about the health and the welfare where industry is going and what is going on across the globe. If you are thinking about short-term decisions versus the long-term impacts and where industry is going, I think we all have to be responsible for it. My son is a junior and he'll be out of the school system pretty soon. So it's not about me. It's about the community that we all live in, the community that we all care about a lot. Sorry, we took on this journey roughly 6 months ago when these kids actually presented the compelling story about the catastrophic impacts that this styrofoam has on the impact and more importantly on the health and the beauty of this society. Just to let you know, from the time we started, this is our third presentation. In last 1 month when we have presented town, 2 towns in the state have already passed a ban on the styrofoam. While we can understand that there are other ramifications, it doesn't come without the cost. But the cost to health, I don't know whether it's negotiable. And it is not only what I call as, when you talk about Massachusetts, we just talked about Massachusetts number 1 in the education. Do we want Massachusetts to continue to be the number 1? California, New York, most other states have actually banned it statewide, which these kids will go talk to you about. Now, but I just want to applaud these juniors because they're very busy. As you can see, they're like almost falling asleep. But they have taken some pains to not only do something for themselves, but for the society. So we should give them, these young men, applaud for doing this, and they will walk you through the story. And let's take questions after that and talk about the health and health impacts of this thing.
So, my name is Raul Razan, and we as students of the Shrewsbury High School community and urge Shrewsbury to move on from the use of styrofoam because of its catastrophic effects on both our health and the environment. And over the next few slides, we'll dig deeper into all of these.
Okay, so here's a picture of some styrofoam in our Shrewsbury schools. Some of it is where we serve the food, and the rest of it ends up in the trash. So we're seeing a lot of these black styrofoam trays as well as other products using styrofoam across our school. And it's not just within the school, but it's also outside of it, as there's a lot of littering going on outside as people bring in their Boston donuts, coffee, and all that stuff, and throw it out sometimes on the street or in the grass. And we also took pictures. All of these pictures, both the ones in SHS and the ones here in Dean Park, were all taken on one day. And we saw so much styrofoam littered at many different locations in both places.
And so the question is, where does this really end up, all this styrofoam waste? And so 80% of it ends up in these landfills. And the problem is that styrofoam is not biodegradable, which means it's going to stay here for thousands and thousands of years. Even after we die, we're going to see this littering our world completely. And then the 20% that doesn't make it into the landfills is almost as bad, or just as bad, because it makes it into our waterways, like our seas and oceans, which leaves for birds and fish to eat it up, which is really bad because these styrofoam has these toxins that will poison these animals, kill them, and end up harming our biodiversity overall. And so this is just a national estimate, and so about $25 billion styrofoam cups are thrown out every single year, and just over this presentation, about 10 minutes, about 50,000 styrofoam cups will be thrown out. And to put that into context, I believe we had the number of 425,000 styrofoam cups just used in our public school system over 1 year, which is like a lot of waste that we have to deal with.
And now let's talk about the proposal or the current solution that we have to our styrofoam issues, and that is incineration. And there are several major problems with this incineration. The first is when we incinerate this styrofoam, it is releasing these like dioxins into the atmosphere, and these dioxins are actually carcinogenic, which means that they lead to cancer in ourselves, our children. We need to be stopping this. And also, styrofoam contains the known carcinogen styrene, which was on a list of the EPA of like 40 known carcinogens. Styrene was on that list. And that is also a problem because when we like incinerate the styrene, it is also going into the atmosphere and it's going into our food chain. So like when we eat things in the environment, like we're taking in this styrene. And also like when styrofoam cups are heated, for example, the styrene like goes into our foods, which is also like leading to cancer in our society. And then another major problem with styrofoam is that like a lot of non-renewable resources go into making it, and like as you all know, I'm sure, these non-renewable resources are often what has been known to like cause climate change. So we need to be limiting this at all costs. And additionally, with styrofoam, there's been a national report of $7 billion of hidden costs when it comes to like creating the styrofoam, which adds about 1.2 cents per cup. That's all like just hidden costs.
So, animals on land, such as ourselves, are also affected in terms of. So, animals as well as sea animals are affected, and we can see through suffocation, choking, intestinal blockages, and entanglement, these sea animals are suffering. On top of that, 2 million birds on land and sea annually are affected. So, we cannot just be thinking of ourselves, we need to be thinking about the biodiversity of our land and of our earth as a whole. So now, over the next few slides, we will be showing our solution.
So here's a map of the United States showing how styrofoam is altered. These styrofoam bans have already spread across the country. The light blue is where there are cities or multiple cities that have already banned styrofoam. The dark blue are states that have major cities that are in the proposals or in the works of banning styrofoam. And you see Massachusetts is on there. We have, at this point, 30 towns that have banned styrofoam already. So let's become the 31st. So, and more importantly, this is potentially the first step towards continuing in support of a statewide polystyrene law. So with the plastic bag ban that we passed recently, that one has currently 70-something towns that have banned them individually, and that's why the movement for a statewide plastic bag ban is growing. Similarly, when we can hop on the bandwagon with styrofoam and join these 30 other towns and help other towns, which are many other towns that are currently proposing styrofoam bans just like we are, if we all can band together, we can have it as a statewide law and enact more change. And so this is the list of the towns. Specifically, 3 of them were added just recently in between our last presentation and this one. Provincetown, Andover, and Orleans. Orleans was passed just today. So many of these towns, if Lee can do it, we can do it.
And so we heard from the last presentation a lot of concerns about how like the dishwashers would be used in schools. But what we're mainly proposing is these compostable, reusable types of alternatives that could be used in schools, and that's the way that many other towns are going right now. So, for example, you can have the compostable, recyclable trays, or even the biodegradable ones that can go just in our regular recycling bins. And so we believe that the result of this ban would be a low economic cost overall for Shrewsbury, and in turn, we'd have a cleaner town with less pollution and a healthier people because we have the decreased likelihood of styrene getting into our food.
But now let's look at like what some other places around the country have done when it comes to styrofoam. So for example, in September 2015, New York City and the 5 other largest urban school districts in the U.S. actually banned styrofoam like across their cities. And as we show you here, that's eliminated 500 million styrene foam trays overall per year from landfills. So like if all these really big cities can do it, you can look at these pictures where you see like their trash cans filled with styrofoam and versus like compostable trays that wouldn't harm the environment nearly as much. So if all these like really big cities can be able to do this, then why can't we?
So, in addition to all the towns that have already banned, several major corporations have also banned polystyrene. For example, Chipotle and McDonald's and Panera have already moving away from polystyrene to alternatives. And Dunkin' Donuts by 2020 is already proposing to completely get rid of polystyrene. And if Dunkin' Donuts, whose logo consists of a polystyrene cup, can move away from polystyrene, then why can't we? And also, the common misconception is that that alternatives are much greater in cost, but it's really not. When looking at this source, we can see that the average cost difference from alternatives to polystyrene itself is really only 1 cent when considering into account all of these different factors.
So what is the bylaw that we proposed? The previous presentation touched on it. Let's focus more specifically. So sections 2 and 3, as they explained, focuses on styrofoam that's used for hot food, so in our schools and restaurants, but it omits like grocery stores, so it allows for if you go and pick up cold fish or meat in those, because when you have hot food, it's more likely to transmit through the the styrene is more likely to be transmitted, whereas with cold food that isn't much of a concern. So that's a major omission. And the other part that wasn't brought up was section 4, which allows for an exemption for or a deferral for businesses that show that they can't financially compete if they have to remove their styrofoam. While we did contact a lot of businesses and very few had problems, if one of them does have a problem, each year they can come and show that fact and they can get a deferment. For majority of businesses, though, they should be able to switch. So the bylaw specifically recommends banning plates, cups, bowls, trays, hinged and lidded containers, but not uncooked food.
And so what we did was, over the past few weeks, we went out and contacted the businesses in Shrewsbury to ask how they would react to a ban. And so about 70% said that they would be in full support of a switch to styrofoam because majority of them don't use styrofoam. And then 20% said that they were willing to go along with the changes as the town makes. And some concern has been with the businesses mainly is that how will it affect the competitiveness. And so while we do have the deferments, we also contacted chains from other towns that have banned styrofoam, and they've all been able to switch to a healthy paper alternative. For example, KFC, which uses a lot of styrofoam right now, said in Natick was able to change to their paper alternatives to make sure that they can be more environmentally friendly. And so we also looked into the impacts to our schools. So on the public schools level, we think that the cost difference will be a little bit more than it would be for the private schools, but we do have ways to address these concerns. So we first believe that like the big hidden costs, like Siddhant talked about, for getting rid of the styrofoam and making that styrofoam is something that's we're not considering, and when we're looking at the main budget itself. But more importantly, we think that there's possibilities for grants. For example, the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Department is ready to hand out or is open to looking into handing out a grant for schools that do use reusable containers and trays. And we also have like the ability of like increasing the demand for all these materials and buying them in bulk, which New York City proved to decrease costs overall for these trays. And so when we contacted the private schools in Shrewsbury, like St. John's and Alhambra, St. John's said that they didn't use a lot of styrofoam. They only used it to, I believe, give out like their pastas on certain days. And Alhambra is completely styrofoam free, and they use biodegradable plates.
So in conclusion, I think we all need to be weighing on a cost-benefit analysis. So while there might be like a small increase in price, you can't really put a price on our health, and that's the most important thing. And they may have brought up issues regarding like the feasibility, but if like 30 other towns in Massachusetts have seen no problem at all switching, then like we shouldn't see an issue either. And we must be weighing like saving our own lives over a small increase in cost.
So this is just going into our bylaw, and we have over 18 months for Shrewsbury to adapt to this ban if it were to pass.
At this time, we'll take the questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions? Mrs. Fritz.
Thank you. I give you a lot of credit. Juniors in high school, it's an excellent presentation, and I know you've spent a lot of time. I've watched a couple of your presentations, and they're all excellent, so thank you for doing that. And I just want to make it clear, and I'm speaking for myself and not for my committee members, we're not dismissing the health pieces of this presentation or anything that you said. But when we look at it, we have to look at the big picture and the costs that are associated with change. The comment that the town could absorb the costs. We also have to look at, budget issues that we're already having with schools and municipal. So we have to really look at the big picture and how can we do this if it passes in the best manner possible. So we're not ignoring either side of it, but we really got to look at it in the big picture. And I did have one question, and it was when you talk about the other towns that have banned, do you have any percentage on ones that compost versus burn?
Oh, no.
I'd be getting into the weeds, yeah. What are other towns doing with the...
So the majority of the people we talk to, for example, like Natick, they are moving to like the paper and compostable items. But while we're still working on like a general consensus of how like those 30 towns are approaching it. We do know specific examples. But addressing your concern about like how we're going to manage those budgets, we do believe that the 2020 date is really important for giving ourselves like those 18 months to prepare for any switch in like the costs and how we're going to move monies around. And what we really want to emphasize is that like while there may be a large startup cost, in the long term we believe, like we've seen other cities do, like New York City, have those costs go down as we increase the demand and buy more in bulk of these alternatives.
Yeah. I think 2 points to make. One is the demand is continuing to increase and the prices have continued to drop. You can see that by 2020 the prices are going to be equal or probably not negotiable. The other part to think about is there has been research published recently that if you actually go to recyclable completely, which could be the ultimate solution, the cost actually is better. Now there is a startup cost, a capital cost to set up the machines and do stuff. But if you look at some research, again, this is an independent research, it is lower cost to run that. Now I know we talked about storing the products, but you have to look at the reverse of also. Storing the styrofoam takes a lot of space because there's storing the paper products probably is not going to take them that much space. So I think there is always arguments on both sides.
Exactly.
And on top of that, we aren't suggesting, we are just, we are proposing a solution. We would leave it up to the town to decide on what's the best possible pathway.
And just finally, to one thing that I think it was Framingham we saw, when they talked about the high startup costs for reusables for like dishwashers and everything, they got a grant of $39,000 to help them start up these costs, to deal with implementing having dishwashers. And the other state, another city, I don't remember exactly which one, Amherst, I believe. One of them got a sizable amount too, of above 10,000 to move towards composting, because the state recognized that if you have composting and you have access to that, that they favored that, and they were able to give money to them too. So we could definitely apply for that, regardless of which solution we go for.
Excellent. Thank you.
Further questions? Mrs. Canzano.
It's not a question really, it's a comment. I thank you for coming. You've given me a lot of food for thought. And like I said before, it's really a complex issue. And as a committee, we have to juggle and balance a lot of different priorities and needs. But I very much appreciate your passion and enthusiasm and research. And I'm really proud of you and the kind of students that you are to be here tonight. And I'll be thinking about this for a good long time. So thank you.
My only question is, do we have a copy of your presentation?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Excellent. Any further questions?
I agree with Aaron. This was an excellent presentation. I thank you for bringing it before us. I also have a lot of research and thinking to do.
Yeah.
Not really prepared to make a decision right now, but I will say I'm very impressed with what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming before the committee. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh,
Make a
I'm
brief
sorry,
comment?
Dr.
Very
Sawyer,
briefly, I
sorry.
know we're over.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll be brief.
Oh, sorry.
A lot of the work we've been doing the last several years has been talking about how do we create more real-world learning opportunities for students. This is real-world learning. I mean, this is not a simulation. You are affecting the political process here in our town of Shrewsbury based on skills that you've gained in our schools, and that makes me very proud as your superintendent. As Mr. Collins indicated earlier, it's not our position to take a a position on this one way or the other. That the wisdom of town meeting will prevail in terms of the vote that will be coming up later this month. But we believe certainly that it will be important for town meeting members to be informed as to what the impact will be in terms of the school department. But again, it was an excellent presentation. Look forward to hearing any public comments. And then again, as Mr. Palich indicated, the school committee will discuss the issue a week from tonight and indicate how they want to address making sure the information around how the school department could be affected if it were to pass. But again, you're to be commended and really appreciate the time.
No, I think the one thing that to comment upon, the Shrewsbury is a fantastic town. That's why it's growing. And in terms of people moving to that, I think the question is how do we want to continue to be imbibing that kind of environment and inviting more people to move to Shrewsbury?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.